we had to replace both of those appliances within a month span. So emergency funds are essentially a savings account that you store away to have in the case of an emergency. So these are essentially rainy day funds where you're not going to touch it, you're going to leave it alone, and you're just going to let it sit there in the event that you actually need it. And when is that exactly? Well, there's a couple things to consider before you decide to use your emergency fund money. First of all, is it an unexpected expense, meaning that you could not have planned for it? The second thing is it essential, like you absolutely need this, you can't live without it? And then, of course, the third thing is, does it need to be taken care of right now? So if it's unexpected, it's essential, and it needs to be dealt with right now, then that would qualify for an emergency expense. And therefore, you would use your emergency fund to do that. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about creating an emergency fund. The first thing you want to do is just create an emergency fund with $1,000. In Dave Ramsey's perspective on finance, he would call this baby step number 1. And the reason why you want to start with an emergency fund of $1,000 is, one, it is manageable. It's something that's doable. If I told you to do 3 to 6 months of expenses right off the bat, many of us would likely not be able to accomplish that. Even Alora and I do not have an emergency fund that is 3 to 6 months of expenses. Sure, we would love to have that eventually, but that is simply not doable with the current situation we're in. Plus, since we're following the baby steps, we're not even supposed to do that until we get out of debt first. So we have not even considered getting an emergency fund of 3 to 6 months yet. So first start with $1,000. And yes, there's many people that would say, well, that's not enough to cover all the things. What about inflation? And start listing off all the reasons why you shouldn't do it. Well, here's my argument to that. It's better to have something than to have nothing. And it is easier to accomplish getting an $1,000 emergency fund compared to 3 to 6 months. So it also feels like a win when you're able to create an emergency fund with $1,000. And then, of course, the last point is you're not using your emergency fund for everything. You're using your emergency fund for emergencies only. So to give you some examples of real life emergencies for my wife and I believe it was about a year ago. It was either a year or 2 ago at this point. We had, in a span of a month, our dishwasher go out and our dryer, not our washing machine, our dryer go out. So we had to replace both of those appliances within a month span. And that ended up costing us a pretty penny there. I think it was close to $1,200 to $1,500. Now, here's the good news about that. We had money stored away from all of our month budgets. If you've watched our budget with us videos, then you know that we always like to leave a little extra. So of course we had that little extra money there plus our emergency fund. The two things combined together was more than enough to cover those costs. And you know, in the moment it was frustrating, but it wasn't horrifying. It was not something that we were freaking out about every moment of the day, wondering how we were going to pay for it. It instead was just kind of annoying because we had to, wash dishes and by hand and dry them for a little while. We had to use my parents' dryer for a little bit and kind of, work around that with the laundry a little bit. So it was a little inconvenient, but it was nothing horrible. It could have been a lot worse. Now, Dave Ramsey would call that peace of mind. Having that $1,000 emergency fund was able to give us some peace of mind. We weren't arguing over the finances because something bad happened that was out of our control, right? Those appliances fell apart. It wasn't my fault. It wasn't my wife's fault. It was nobody's fault. It just happened. So an emergency fund is not only great when it comes to your finances, But if you happen to be married, it might also help out your marriage a little bit too, because now you're not arguing and scrambling and getting mad over these things that are happening to you. The next thing to think about is once you have that $1,000 emergency fund and you have started to get out of debt and you start to get some margin in your budget, is to start building toward 3 to 6 months expenses. This is something that Alora and I are planning to do once I get my student loan debt paid off. We're going to start chipping in $100 to $200 a month, slowly growing that emergency fund to get to 3 to 6 months of expenses, starting with 3, and then eventually we'll grow from there. So for us, about 3 months of expenses, that's about $9,000, because we spend roughly around 3, a little bit less than that, sometimes 2,800, somewhere around there. So we would want to estimate toward the high side. So we'll say 3. So, 3 times 3, that's 9. So roughly around $9,000 is what it'll take for us for a 3-month emergency fund. So we'll probably grow to that point, give it a little pause, and then eventually grow it another 3 at some point to get to the fully funded emergency fund. But obviously we're going to be doing that, sort of splitting our goals a little bit. We also need to get some other things accomplished as well instead of just the emergency fund. So we'll be splitting things a little bit. We probably won't get that accomplished as quickly as we have been able to work down that student loan debt that I have mentioned in previous videos. So if you're looking for peace of mind, if you're looking to try to get ahead, if you're looking to try to avoid going into debt like credit card debt and things like that, I would consider starting an emergency fund. And just start out small. Do something small like $1,000, and then work your way through as you stabilize your budget and, make some progress there.